So today is Saturday, March 9th, 2024. My name is Grace Park, and I am interviewing Terrence Tran on behalf of the Houston Asian American Archive at Rice University. So first, I'm going to ask you a few questions regarding your early life. So could you tell me when and where you were born?
Sure. Was born in Houston, Texas, 1992. So I've been born and raised here. So I've lived in Houston my whole life. I went to a bunch of different schools in HISD and then Cypress ISD, so a little northwest of Houston for the last couple years in high school.
I see. And how would you describe your childhood and adolescence years? So if there were any special holidays, traditions, or just memories you recall growing up?
So growing up, I wouldn't say I was the only Asian American person, but I was one of the few. So I do vividly remember uh being like 5 or 6 and kids saying like, how do you say this in Vietnamese? And how do you say that in Vietnamese? And I think I was a little annoyed, but it was like a 5% annoyed, and I just went along with it anyway. But I mostly just remember uh not thinking about it, and then maybe when I was like 7 or 8, realizing I live in Texas. Oh, and I'm Asian. I didn't know at all. I didn't even think about it. So that's the big things I remember. Just kind of not realizing and slowly learning that I'm a little slightly different than most of the people around me.
Yeah, for sure. I think as you grow up, you have that realization. My next question is, what were your parents' occupations and what are some of the values and lessons that your parents instilled in you?
Sure. So, my mom was a teacher. When I was a younger kid, she owned a laundromat, but I guess she didn't want to do that long term. And then my dad, he worked a lot of different jobs. They broke up when I was 3 or 4, so I don't remember exactly what he did for work, but he did a lot of different jobs like interpreting and then something in an office one time. He brought me to like bring your kid to work one day, but I don't really understand what he was doing. But yeah, that's the main thing I remember from what they did for work.
I see. And my next question is, what was your favorite subject in school and what were some of your aspirations or like dream career as a child?
So for me, school wasn't necessarily hard until I had to try, and then I didn't really know how to study. So for the last couple years in high school, I struggled, and then when I went to college, I was like, okay, I got to straighten up a little more, and I figured it out. But I wasn't that uh concerned with like what I wanted to do, so I had those aspirations that I didn't put any real weight into. It was like, oh, I want to be a movie star, but did I want to act? I don't know. I wanted to be a rapper, but did I show really any promise in that? Not really. When it comes to the favorite subjects, I think I liked math a little bit, but that's just because my mom was a math teacher, so it just came a little easier. But for me, school was just like a place I went and learned some things in general, and I just hung out. So I didn't take it super serious until I absolutely had to.
I see. Can I ask, was your mom also part of like the Houston International School District? Like, did you come in a lot of contact with her when you were a student yourself, or?
Actually, no, she worked in different schools than the schools I went to. I think she worked in spring. So I was in HISD while she worked in spring. So I never saw her around school or anything. Um, yeah, that's it.
I see. And then my next question is, were there any historic event or narrative that impressed you the most from, your first year of history classes or textbooks?
I do remember learning about the Old West and finding out that there were a lot of cowboys of different ethnicities. I guess the single story in my mind was that it was just Anglo white looking people. And then when I learned that there's a lot of different kinds of cowboys, it was like very eye opening and like world opening for me. So that's something that I always think back to.
Mm. I did not know that. So
Oh yeah,
listening for me too. Um,
yeah.
okay, and then now I'm gonna ask you a few questions regarding your college and just education. So at what point in your life were you inspired to study English?
So it took me very long. When I was in college, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. So at first I was like, okay, I guess I'll be a business major. And I took one economics class, and I was like, I can't do this. I took it for a week and I dropped it. I was like, okay, I have to pivot to something else. Uh, I I think I briefly thought about doing communications, but I was like, nah, that doesn't seem to gel with me. So the first 2 years of college, I took at Lone Star Community College, and I didn't have any elective classes. They were all math classes because I still really didn't know what to do. So I decided to do English because I wanted to be an attorney. So I was like, okay, I could get an English degree and that would work into going into law school. So that was my big takeaways from my undergrad. Then I went to law school and I realized like, oh, I don't like this either. Uh I really enjoyed English in college. In high school, it was just whatever for me, but for whatever reason in college I really took to it. So after graduating and like realizing law school wasn't for me, it took a little bit of, I guess, soul searching. And I just kind of really like creating different perspectives and kind of the research aspect and kind of formulating these thoughts together in a way to present it to people.
I see. And then I see that, you've spent your college years in a few different institutions, right? So the Lone Star Community College, the law school, as well as University of Houston. So how would you describe your undergraduate or other years at those institutions?
Yeah, it was interesting because they're all in Houston technically, but they're very different places. When I went to Lone Star, I was taking the classes in Cypress. So there was everyone lived around there. We're all 18, 19, 20 years old. And then when I went to the university, it was in downtown and I had to commute for the first time. So I was living in Cypress at the time and I would have to drive there. And I had never driven that far before. And I think I just got a car when I went to UH. So I was driving like 30 minutes, actually maybe 40 to 50 minutes because I wasn't taking the highway yet. So it was just small roads. And then it was interesting because it was a lot more people, but the range and ages and experiences opened up a lot. So there's a lot more older people trying to get their degrees later in life. Some people who might be working in like another degree, a master's degree as well. And so that was uh, very world opening again, just in who lives in Houston and who's even going to college. And then when I went to law school, it was a very specific set of people. Of course, there are a lot of people from different walks of life and stages of life, but all of them had a very lawyerly thing to them, very ambitious, very specific with intention in their words. So for me, I didn't really enjoy law school because it just didn't feel, it felt like I always had to be in competition personally. I'm sure there's plenty of people that don't feel that way. And that I didn't really like that environment for myself.
Yeah, for sure. I can see how, like being surrounded by such a wide spectrum diversity of people could have been eye-opening at the age of like 18, 19, 20. So related to that, did you have any professors, mentors, or fellow students who left a significant impact on your life, whether that's academically, socially, or otherwise?
Yeah, so I had a few teachers in high school that I look back to and I realized they had a bigger impact than I thought. Uh, I joined speech and debate my last 2 years in high school and I really enjoyed it. And I thought it was just kind of fun at the time. But looking back, it really did just help me feel more confident in expressing myself. I'm still not great at public speaking or anything, but I feel like I at least understand what is good public speaking and how to make form a good argument. And in college, I had a few teachers during my last 2 years as well that really had impact on me. I took, I think, two or three film analysis classes, and that really kind of awoke a passion in criticism and analysis for me. I think that was Professor Jackson, and he was he was quite animated, but I really enjoyed how he kind of broke down how to look at things with a critical eye and to put things in perspective. And I had one more teacher, her name escapes me, but I took at least two creative writing classes with her. And that also really built my confidence in just writing stories in a lot of different ways. Because looking back at that time, I thought I was already, oh, I'm already great at writing, whatever. And I think they're pretty bad now, but it was a great experience just to be able to craft these stories, ideas, and kind of share with other people.
Yeah, that's amazing that you're able to, recall how these professors have, shaped you to become who you are today. So that's amazing. And then my next question is, what was your first job?
My first job. So I actually was late to working. My mom was very, I think she just wanted me to just be able to do well in school and have a childhood and relax and all that. So I only started working when I was about 18 or 19. And I think this is when I decided I wanted to go to law school. So I interned at a law firm. It only lasted about a month or so before I guess the internship ended, or I forgot what happened. Either I couldn't keep doing it or something along those lines. But it was either an international law firm or international law firm trying to get uh Asians in America citizenship with green cards and things like that. And it was very interesting. I had a I don't know if the word's interesting, but it was neat to see these attorneys. They were husband and wife. They were helping immigrants become citizens, and that was really cool to see. It was kind of wholesome in a way. Later on, I think they got in trouble with the law, but yeah,
Oh, I see. I hope they're doing okay, but that does
I
sound.
don't think they are.
Oh no.
It was in the news.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm still glad, you were able to have that eye-opening experience and hopefully
Yeah, yeah.
um yeah, and now I'm gonna ask you a few questions regarding your career in teaching. So how would you describe your experience as an ELA instructor at the Harmony School of Advancement as well as the Houston and Cypress-Fairbanks Independent School District?
Yeah, so after I left law school, I had to find some means of work, obviously. And since my mom was a teacher, she knows like, hey, you could be a substitute teacher. There are flexible hours, and etc. So I tried that out for a couple years as I was working on things to study and just improve my resume. And so my plan was just to substitute various different age groups and see which one I was comfortable with. Although I enjoyed teaching or interacting with elementary kids, it was just very exhausting. And what I found is that I had a much easier time in high school, even though it seems like a lot of people are kind of scared of that for whatever reason. But for me, it was very natural and it was easy. So I locked in on that and I started teaching English. And then once I got started, obviously I was a little nervous, but I think it's very rewarding just to see them grow as students, develop their skills in writing, and also building relationships with them to where they feel comfortable failing, talking to you, and expressing themselves. And whether I realized I was doing it or not, it just kind of reflected in their ability to write and form their own ideas in a way that's presentable and then that other people can understand and be convinced of what they're saying. So it's been a very rewarding job, if not a little taxing.
Yeah, that's amazing to hear that, you're able to witness all that growth in your students. Um, so yeah, related to that, what would you say are some of the most impactful moments in your teaching career so far?
Hmm. It's probably just the little things like students, a handful of students during the holidays or at the end of the year will give a lot of their teachers gifts. And sometimes I could tell, excuse me, sometimes I could tell it's like, okay, they give it to everybody. It's one and the same. It's still a nice gesture. But the things that really feel impactful are when students like, hey, Mr. Tran, you really changed my life, or you had a great impact on me. I'm so grateful for you. And they don't even know that I take that and I keep that, and I'm like, I'm crying inside in the teacher's lounge or something just because it's just so wholesome. And I'm like, I'm just going to work like 9 to 5, whatever. And then here this kid's like, you're a big inspiration and all that. So it happens when I least suspect it, but those are the moments that really feel like, wow, there's something very fulfilling and genuine happening here.
Yeah, that's so sweet. And my next question is, why is teaching important to you, and what do you hope to achieve as a teacher? And what aspirations do you have for yourself as you continue to walk in your teaching journey?
So when it comes to teaching, I think I would just like to help the next generation be more literate, uh, able to analyze things with a critical eye, and just understand the arts, literature, just anything that's happening in the world. Because not to get really old man, yells at a cloud, but there's just a lack of understanding of nuanced concepts. So things such as satire or anything that's just not very upfront with its meaning seems to get lost a lot of the time. And I'm very happy to see when students are able to understand the subtext of something, or like the deeper meaning, or like a dual meaning. Anything that isn't just very easy to comprehend, but very obviously is being told to you on purpose. I would like everyone to be able to understand that, because that's what art is all about. And I've grown to really appreciate art. For myself, I think I want to just keep molding other younger minds just to be able to appreciate what is being told to them, rather than telling them what to think. They can come. My whole philosophy is that they can take away whatever they want. They can feel however they feel, but they need to at least understand what is happening, rather than misinterpreting it and then having a whole opinion about it. So moving forward, I'm considering like going furthering my own education, maybe teaching like at university, like down the line. But right now it's a little too far away for me to think about. So I'm just focusing, being in the moment of just what I'm working on right now.
Yeah, that's great. I'm very excited to see, what's to come for your teaching journey as well as the general education scene. And so now kind of moving on to your like content creation aspect of your career. Can I ask, how did you first come to pursue content creation, and how did the Quality Culture channel come to be?
Yeah, so when it comes to YouTube and just content creation, it only started during the pandemic, really, when everyone was at home. So I think a lot of YouTube channels started around that time because everyone's at home and you could finally do it. For me and Stephanie, my partner on the channel, we always thought, oh, we have these ideas about things that nobody's talking about. It'd be cool just to get it out there. And originally, we just wanted to have the idea exist. So somewhere somebody can find this and be like, oh, that's my idea. Because something that I was this a phenomenon or a sensation I've always felt on the internet is that eventually somebody says something I think, and I'm like, okay, great, it's out there. But there's always little pockets of things where nobody's saying this, but it needs to be said by somebody. So the idea was just to have our ideas out there. If 10 people saw it, it was enough. Just somebody would know. A couple videos blew up, like went viral, and it made it like, okay, so we're not just some random person. We can kind of really do this and have an audience. We took it a little more serious, to where we upload more consistently, put more work into it, research, editing, featuring other people, citing our sources more. So the more serious it got, the more serious we took it, and it kind of became what it became today, where we have 200 something thousand subscribers, and lots of videos with people who are very well regarded in the YouTube community as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. I totally relate to that about, like seeking for like a thought, um, or looking for someone on the internet who like shares the same insights as me. So that's amazing how it grew from that to like, 200K subscribers. Um, and so my next question is, what are the demographic characteristics of your audience?
So it kind of fluctuates depending on what's our most recent video, which one is really getting viral or blowing up. For a long time, when we first started, it seemed like the audience was people who were into nostalgic cartoons. So cartoons, children's cartoons from like 20 years ago or something like that. But me and Stephanie, we never really wanted to just do just one genre of something. So we wanted to just expand it. So early on, it was kind of really hard work to continue to satisfy that audience while satisfying our own creative ambitions and just getting our thoughts out because we're not just interested in one thing. We want to talk about lots of different things. So after that, I think a certain video about the movie The Lovely Bones, which was also a book, I believe, that one got really big and our audience started to skew quite largely with the female demographic. And so obviously we try to satiate that too, but continuing to want to just do what we want rather than only appease these audiences. It kind of mixes and varies. I think our audience can shift from men and women, but it typically comes from an audience that wants to appreciate and understand a piece of media or art. So sometimes we're talking about authors or books. I really do enjoy talking about musicians because we can hear a song or maybe an album and think it sounds nice and understand the lyrics on the surface level, but there's a lot of the times there's a bigger picture happening, and that's the part that I like about music, where you can appreciate it in the moment and not have any idea what's happening in this larger context of their career. So personally, I like putting things into context, like looking back at an old movie, seeing what the world was like and comparing it to today and how we view it today. So I think our audience comes from people who just like to understand the nuances, the history of how these pieces of art come to be.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like it's, really easy to miss those nuances in the greater context. So, yeah, that's amazing. And my next question is, what does the typical process look like from, initially choosing a video essay topic to ultimately publishing the video on YouTube?
So now that we have to take it a little more serious, we have to think about, well, is it gonna do well? Is anybody gonna watch it? So we have to balance that with our own interests because there's lots of things that I would like to talk about that I'm sure would not make a lot of money. And sometimes they still don't, but it is what it is. What we do is usually the first step is whether something really interests us, like if we feel like we have a lot to say about it. Because there's things that are very popular that thousands of people talk about like in depth on YouTube or wherever that maybe I do have something to say, but they're already saying it. So we personally don't feel like we're adding anything to that conversation. If we feel like we have something to add, that's when we really feel the spark. Once that happens, we start to do research, which could be anything from reading books, just Googling, finding academic research, sometimes finding someone, an accredited person to talk to. And once we do that, we're gathering all that information and starting to write. And when we write is basically like one of those essays you write for class, except these are our own rules that we give to ourselves. Like, how long do we want it to be? What is it about? What sources do we want to use? That's up to us. And it can take a long time for me since I have another job. I have to take some time on my personal time to do it, so it takes longer. It takes a couple months for me to write a video, and essentially it's just a regular essay, but just pretending like I'm also going to show some things as well. And so I'm writing notes about what clips to put, what interviews to put, maybe a joke or two, something like that. And then it gets to the editing the video. that's when Stephanie works on it because I don't have any video editing experience, but she does. So she puts it all together, and by that time is when it becomes what you see on YouTube.
I see. Thank you so much for that walkthrough of the whole process. Um, and then you kind of mentioned, having to balance your other job with content creation. So how do you balance or also kind of like integrate your teaching and content creation with each other? So what does time management look like? And do you ever find that, one profession influences the way you approach the other one?
Maybe subconsciously, but I'm not actively trying to marry them together. Uh, when I'm doing work for school is when I'm like, I can only focus on doing this. So like doing grades, a lesson plan, making sure all these kids understand what's going on, if they're where they need to be. And then when I'm at home, when I'm finished with all that, is when I could think about doing things creatively. The only times they kind of intersect is when I give assignments that are creative, and sometimes there's an intersection. They think of certain ideas, and they ask like, how do I write this? And I'm like, well, you got to do introduction, body, conclusion, and that's essentially what I'm already doing when I'm writing video essays for YouTube. So that intersection happens just when it comes to them writing concise and structured paragraphs and essays, but when it comes to how they work together, they're pretty separate parts of my life that I try to keep separate.
I see. And then I know you just kind of mentioned you keep those parts separate, but do you think there are some similarities or differences in your interaction with your students versus like your audience slash subscribers?
It's interesting because the for YouTube and subscribers, there's like that whole parasocial relationship. Not to say that I'm famous, but people will see you on the internet and they kind of know you because you're speaking to them, but they don't really know you. So they talk to you like they know you, and it's very weird to me, like a stranger just jumping into a conversation, either disagreeing or agreeing. And it can always feel weird in that way. The relationships that I have in school are much more familial. Obviously, after we get to know each other in the first month or so of school, but they know me and we know each other personally. So I'm working with them, actively helping them, actively thinking about their performance in school and even just how what's going on in their life. For YouTube, it's just interesting to see how people are invested in us or just even a specific video and take big sweeping takeaways about who I am or what I think or how wrong I am or just how incredible something is. It's very I don't know, kind of isolating in its own weird way because I'm just trying to put my thoughts out and then suddenly there's thousands of comments saying something about it. It's very different than talking to someone directly.
Right. Yeah, that's very interesting. I never thought about it as, like your subscribers are total strangers to you, but they somehow know you. So that's very
Yeah, it's like they're reading like a diary for me, and I don't know anything about them.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So my next question is, what are some of your biggest sources of inspiration in generating video ideas, and how do you select which movies, shows, or books to make videos about?
So when it comes to the selection process, it's something we think is in this sweet spot of popular enough for people to want to talk about it, to check it out, but not talked about in depth enough to where we can add something to it. And so, if it's a book, for example, one of our more popular videos is about Frog and Toad. That's a book a lot of us read when we were kids, but it's not something that people are talking about today as like, really analyzing the themes and what's going on. But when we did that, I personally was like, oh, okay, neat, sure, why not? But it really blew up and it kind of speaks to something that's not talked about, but we all know. And when you see it, it's like, oh, I want to see more about that. So that's like that sweet spot where we really enjoy. But sometimes it's just something that really inspires us to say something. It doesn't have to be about the views. It's just something you find interesting. Some of my favorite videos on the channel are the ones that are like really, really low in views, but I really enjoy my take on it or our take on it because not enough people are saying that. What was the other question? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're good. It was just how do you find like what are some of your biggest sources of inspiration in generating ideas?
Oh, right. When it comes to inspiration, it's a lot of I guess, the original generation one of the video essayists. So it would be the easy ones like ContraPoints or Lindsay Ellis, and maybe even some review type people. I do enjoy Anthony Fantano's review style, and even Chris Stuckman's review style when he was still reviewing movies consistently. But when it comes to what we do, I think we take a lot of influence from the big video essay type creators because they could take deep dives into something. They find sources, accredited sources, quotes, video clips, to just put everything in the context. And it's not just about this is my opinion, but also these are facts and people who studied this like thoroughly rather than just some guy on the internet talking.
Right, I see. And then just out of curiosity, do you ever get commissioned to make videos or is it just out of your
We get asked to, but we haven't done it because we we do our best just to do videos we're actually inspired to do. Obviously, sometimes you just do a video and you're inspired, but it's not like the most pressing thing you want to talk about. But we don't really do commissions because we have to have a genuine interest in talking about it.
Yeah, for sure. I think that genuine interest is a really important factor. Um, and then speaking of which, what do you think are the most important factors to keep in mind or, challenges to overcome when analyzing popular media?
When it comes to popular media, it seems like you have to really preface your words. And what I mean is, there's always someone ready to interject with a yeah, but what about this? And yeah, but what about that? And for me personally, I feel like it's always important to just repeat that you understand these things are criticisms or thoughts out there because it seems like if you say it once, nobody will remember and they'll just think you're not acknowledging something. So that seems to be something that is always on my mind of I know that people think this, but I believe this because of X, Y, and Z. And I always have to keep repeating. I know that people think that. Like that's something I always am doing in my type of videos.
Mm. Um, and then what are the most significant challenges that you had to overcome so far in your content creating journey?
The biggest challenge would just be balancing how much time and effort we need to put into it versus how how much money is coming back to make it worthwhile. Like if we're putting like 100-hour weeks into something that, is the equivalent of like a $10 an hour job, 40 hours a week, we really have to question like, okay, is this something that's worth investing in because it's going to grow later? Or do we have to like cut back? So that's always the big balancing act for YouTube because it's so inconsistent. Like being a teacher, that's where I can have a consistency in my income. So I don't have to really worry week to week, month to month about, paying the bills. But with YouTube, it's very finicky. It's very uncertain like if a video we expect to do well, like very well, actually does that, or if a video that we think we're doing for ourselves, maybe that blows up and we get a bunch more income than we expect. But the biggest issue with YouTube these days is just finding the balance between doing what we want to do and making videos and content that we're really proud of and considering if it's monetarily feasible to keep doing that.
Yeah, for sure. I can totally see how difficult it'll be to, keep the ideal balance. Um, my next question is, what would you say is the greater message that you seek to convey to the world through your quality culture channel? And what do you just ultimately hope to accomplish through your channel?
That's a good question. I think for me, I want to just the original idea is just to have our put our ideas out there, but there's also these little wrinkles and addendums in that idea inherently. I think both of us don't really want to be those type of YouTubers or content creators, whatever we want to call it, that just find something popular that people dislike excuse me, that find something popular that people don't like and just kind of talk about it and make jokes and say how bad it is. We want to talk about things that we like. So that's why we kind of called it quality culture, saying things that we think is good, that we enjoy, that deserves to be discussed. And I think that's the big idea we want to push forward with the channel and the videos we make. Obviously, it's from our perspective, and we're gathering our sources when we do research, but the idea is to really dissect media that reflects something about our culture because regardless of how abstract or small scale it is, it does say something about our own experiences when we watch it, when we read it, when we listen. We apply it to our own world. We apply it to how we see things, how we think other people see things, and it's all reflective of experiences shared, or maybe just someone is having this experience and it's eye-opening. So I think that's just the big idea. We want to really embrace the things we enjoy and break open as much detail and understanding as we can for it.
Yeah, that's great. And very excited to see what's to come for the Quality Culture channel. And so kind of shifting gears to the next section of questions. I'll be asking you a few questions about, your Asian American identity and how that interacts with your career. So how do you think your identity as an Asian American influences your teaching and your approach to your overall career?
So when it comes to teaching, it's just kind of funny because a lot of the students, if they're not my student yet, they might think that I'm not an English teacher. They think I'm a math teacher or like the science teacher or something like that. And I guess I get it because that's just the trope. But I do like the fact that I can be an Asian American man teaching English class to them. And not to say there's like a stigma or anything, but it's just that Asian Americans are also proficient in English as well. Yes, we're good at math and science, but we can also be here with using our words because we speak English too. When it comes to that, I guess I also have a young face, so they always think that I am just an Asian student sometimes, depending on how I dress a certain day. So there's that. But it really mostly I find it personally fulfilling just to be I guess a positive, strong Asian man in their lives. But yeah, that part tickles me a little bit, but it's fun to think that I can kind of expand our understanding of like, oh, Asian American men are also people who like to talk and write.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a perfect segue into my next question because what is your view on how Asian Americans are regarded in the American education system in regards to ideas like, model minority and all those perceptions?
Oh yeah, yeah. So I think that's all a part of it. The model minority label kind of is thrust upon a lot of students and faculty. We assume that they have to be very good with numbers and that they're all very studious. And it's so ingrained that it's easy to forget that we as Asians or Asian Americans ourselves also hold these beliefs, whether we realize it or not. Sometimes it's subconscious, like an Asian American student might be struggling a little bit. I think oh, he's okay, he can figure it out or something. And I have to actively remember, like, no, that's just a perception I'm holding. I have to be active and thinking critically about every student. So that label gets applied to everyone, and even ourselves, we see it too. So for myself, I like being somebody that can express my personality in school so they can see that, oh, Mr. Tran has a lot of things going on. He's not just a teacher. He's not only thinking about school. Yes, he cares about education, but he cares about a bunch of other stuff too. So I like being a presence where I can expand their understanding of that to where maybe one day in their subconscious is like, well, when they meet some Asian American person, they won't just expect them to be book smart. They can also expect them to be like that teacher they had one time in high school.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really important to recognize, the perception not only we don't only receive the perception from other people, but we can only, we can also put it on ourselves. So, yeah, thank you for your answer. And my next question is, what is your view on how Asian Americans are received and portrayed in the American or just the worldwide media scene? And how would you evaluate the Asian American representation in the current YouTube community and just the general social media scene?
I think it's been evolving for a lot of different reasons lately. The model minority thing is still real. I think people still expect that, but now it is branching out to where the the um, the American ecosystem, we kind of embrace international things more. So things like K-pop, which I think is not exactly the same as Asian American, but it's still applied to us, so it's fine. It kind of expands everyone's appreciation and understanding of what Asian people are like. So with that and the rise of things like anime, there's a different level of appreciation to where the model minority myth isn't the only thing applied. Now there's a lot of different things that bring us together. Because of that, I think there's an expanding appreciation for Asian people and what we can do. So when it comes to things like YouTube, which has always had Asian people since the beginning, I think very prominently actually, we can kind of see that it has they Asian people can do things that are unrelated to their Asianness. I can talk about movies or whatever. Maybe someone else is doing skits or something, and it doesn't have to really focus on our Asianness. Where before, I think that was sort of an inherent part of it. There was like oh, it's the Asian guy doing this Asian woman doing this. It's very paired with our personality. Not to say that it's something separate, but it was like the big part that we always had to acknowledge. So I feel like now we can kind of expand a little more beyond just our ethnicity.
Yeah, for sure. I think for me too, I really feel like I witness that expansion like every day on a daily basis. So I think it's really good. And then my next question is, do you have any special approaches, mindsets, or just perspectives that you implement when you analyze media involving Asian American figures?
What's interesting about the media with Asian Americans is that there's sort of this is something I'm going to be writing about, so I'm going to say that a lot, but a cyclical nature about it. And what I mean is that there's always a pressure to get it right. So if there's something like Crazy Rich Asians, it'll be celebrated for being one of the few movies with an all Asian cast, and then eventually someone will be like, well, if it's supposed to be a celebration of Asians, why is it just East Asians? Why is it just Chinese people? And then there's this really difficult to grasp understanding of what it even means to be Asian American because we can be from our family origins can be from different countries that might even hate each other or maybe are just so dissimilar from each other. It's hard to identify with each other. But for example, a Japanese centered story will be overall said to be an Asian thing to when someone who's from India or their family from India would maybe not feel quite as attached to that. So I find that really fascinating because that's not something that's just a 2024 thing. That's been around since the beginning of when Asian Americans were coined.
Yeah, for sure. That's very interesting to consider. My next set of questions will be about your identity. So my first question is, what does your Vietnamese heritage mean to you?
I had like a long time to think about that just because when I was a kid, I didn't think about it that hard, and I kind of just wanted to be normal. And at that time, that just meant not being so ethnically different. So obviously, I was speaking English all the time, but my first language when I was a baby or a child was Vietnamese. Now I could speak it okay, but it's not great anymore. So it kind of flipped. But when it comes to my identity as a Vietnamese man, I kind of struggle with it because when I was growing up, I really just didn't want to be different. I didn't want that to be a factor at all. So the model minority stuff, whether I knew consciously knew about it or not, was something I always tried to go against. And that kind of informed my interest growing up. But now I kind of regret pushing that aside because I do feel a little lost in my connection to my heritage. My language is not super strong. I can speak it okay, but I don't feel like I understand all the beats of the culture. I haven't been to Vietnam and things of that nature. So I think that's a very universal feeling for a lot of Asian Americans. Just see seeing and feeling a disconnect with your culture. So that's something that I'm dealing with now. And honestly, is kind of the inspiration for these videos I've been doing lately about Asian American experiences. Is just even exploring my own relationship and disconnection with my Vietnamese heritage.
Yeah, for sure. And I was discussing this a little bit with Dr. Chow in regards to the movie The Joy Luck Club, but how do you view your own family's dynamics against the more stereotypical Western perception of Asian families?
So I think the stereotypical view is usually of China or Japan, and maybe it's changed over the years just to because time has passed. But my family came from Vietnam, obviously, and during a time with extreme war and hardships happening. So both my parents were refugees and came here through really tough circumstances. But when it comes to the perception of that, I think there's just an idea that it's similar to being Chinese or something along that nature of just a general East Asian culture. And while there's a lot of intersection for me personally with Vietnamese culture, there are differences. And I don't think most people appreciate or really understand that Vietnam shares a lot of cultural things with China, but very much does not like China. So calling someone who's Vietnamese Chinese is, I wouldn't say offensive because I don't really associate with, mainland ideas, but it's not really appropriate because of how much history there is between those two countries. And so that's something I just find interesting because, you're kind of grouped together with all these people who you may or may not have dicey historical relationships with.
Right, for sure. I think it's really important to be mindful of those, historical factors and how they impact interactions on a daily basis. So my next question is, are there any extracurricular activities like sports, organizations, or religion that you enjoy engaging in?
Yeah, obviously every year I set off my New Year's resolution to work out more, but I enjoy playing basketball, whether I'm good at it or not. I used to play football, but it's just a lot harder to get that many people together. I like being active if I can. It really is good for my health, but the big things I enjoy doing are kind of related to the channel. I love watching TV, enjoying the stories. I think I'm watching Shogun most recently is very cool. I got a movie pass this year, so I'm trying to enjoy the theater experience more because back in my college days, a long time ago, uh, I was just on my menace time, just going almost every day by myself to the theater just to watch movies. Looking back, I don't know why, but I do that. I really I enjoy a lot of things that I want to incorporate into the channel, but who knows if it makes sense. Like I'm very into football and basketball, watching it as well. So I listen to podcasts about it, all the analytics, and then one thing that people don't know I'm really into is pro wrestling. It's stupid and weird, but I like it.
Yeah, that's great that you enjoy such a wide range of activities. And my next question is, what do you feel the most proud of?
The most proud of. That's hard to say. I think I'm most proud of is it's usually when I can see the results of it or the appreciation of it, but just I'm most proud of when people I can influence someone and give them a new perspective on something. Because my main idea in my job as a teacher, educator, and a content creator, I don't find the most satisfaction in just informing you or trying to tell you to think the way I do, but I really, really take pride in showing different perspectives just to give an understanding of things. And I really am proud of when students or someone, a stranger on YouTube, is just like, I never thought about it like that. And now I see it differently. And that's something I really take pride in.
Yeah, for sure. I can totally see how rewarding that would be. Um, and the next question is, how do you want to be remembered? Whether that's, as a friend, mentor, content creator, or in any other roles.
For me, I only think about being remembered by people I interact with personally and have a real relationship with. So on an everyday level with my friends and family and even students at school, I would just want to be remembered as someone who was considerate and they felt like they wouldn't be judged by what they tell me. Even if I have my own ideas on it, I want to be supportive and someone that is a positive influence, obviously. As corny as that is, I really like just being somebody's, I guess, a source for somebody to be like, Mr. Tran or Terrence, whoever, whether they liked me or not, whether they agreed with me, they really they spoke to me and they saw me with an open heart at all times and was genuine. When it comes to YouTube, I really just want to be someone that can provide a nuanced perspective because when it comes to the internet, something I've grown to dislike strongly is one, misinformation, but two, really broad statements. Whether I agree with them or not, I just have really found it distasteful to make sweeping generalizations when there's so many of us in the world with so many different views. There's wrinkles to them, little differences that need to be discussed and understood as best as they can. And so that's the main thing I would want from my internet career, so to speak, to be about just providing as much nuance as I can.
Yeah, thank you so much for your response. And the next question is, when and where do you feel the most at home or that you truly belong?
Hmm. When and where? Well, in a literal sense, my actual home. Uh, I love being home. But where I truly belong, that's tough to say. I think there's really no physical place. It's just with friends and family who I feel like are who genuinely care and love for me, and that anywhere we are together feels like home. As corny and cheesy as that is.
Yeah, that's very true. People are your homes. Yeah. All right. So moving on to the last section of the interview. This section will be about, advice for future generations. So what are your hopes for the next few decades within like the YouTube or social media culture and community?
So my hopes for the future community. Well, could you repeat the question one more time?
Yeah, for sure. What are your hopes for the next few decades within the YouTube or social media culture and community?
Okay. I hope for the future of these communities is that it w- there would be a focus on really considerate thoughts and ideas and discussions rather than aggregated sort of inflammatory statements and visuals that are only meant to or mainly meant to grab our attention rather than to make us really digest ideas and consider them for ourselves because I I liked when I was younger, I was on the internet a lot as well, and I really enjoyed that time of just the Wild West element of it. There was no algorithm. It was mostly just if it's there, and you can take it as you will. And now it feels like everything is tailored for you, and that's good to keep our eyes, but it's not good to me for us to grow in our understanding of the world. And that's just something I would much prefer online spaces be about, just sharing different ideas. And whether we like them or not, we can really understand them rather than already having inflammatory statements about something when you're just finding out about it.
I see. Thank you for your response. And my next question is, do you have any advice for Asian American students in general, and also for those who are hoping to pursue a career in teaching or content creation?
So for Asian American students, I think for them, I would just say that if they want to pursue education or even YouTube, I think nowadays is it's always going to be better than it was before. Every day, whether we realize or not, is a step forward, whether it's minuscule or not. So I genuinely think there's nothing that's stopping them from pursuing whatever career they want. They just have to push for it. They just have to like really give it everything they have. When it comes to the students, I already know that students, if they genuinely care for something, they could do it. And so in that way, I'm an optimist. I really do think today was better than yesterday, and 10 years ago will be better than today. And in those 10 years, who knows what can happen because things can change so much. So I see all of them as having a future as bright as they want. They just have to light the candle. Oh, I like that line.
We should write it down. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah, and then if you had the power to make change in society, what would be on the top of your list?
To change society. Is this like a government question or is it just like a people thing?
It could be anything.
I guess I would, if I could change anything, I would change people's indifference. I would rather people care more. Nothing makes me more annoyed, disappointed, sad, angry is when people say, I don't know, I don't care because they're not thinking about it. I think if we really, really like genuinely cared about things more, the world would improve much quicker.
Yeah, for sure. I very much agree with that. And then for the very last question, if you could go back in time and give a piece of advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Hmm. If I can give a piece of advice to my younger self, I think I would just say, don't worry so much about fitting in, because I think for me personally, that still informs me now to a certain extent, but it just clouded my ability to embrace life with things I genuinely enjoyed or genuinely would appreciate, such as my own culture and family, and even things that made me actually happy. I think it would be better if I just was able to be in the moment and just genuinely cared about what I actually wanted rather than thinking about what other people would think about me if I do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, for sure. Those are all the questions that I prepared, but did you have anything that you wanted to add on or?
I don't know if I have anything else to add on, but yeah, I think just for Asian Americans, I think I can see in 10, 20 years looking back at this and saying this is such like a foreign experience to what Asian Americans decades from now will experience, which will be great. And I'm looking forward to that day as well.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. All right.